Hi, all everyone, and welcome to DRB. This is Aswathy Alex, and I'd like to remind you all by saying is that being disciplined is the greatest form of self-love. So, for topic for today's discussion is that how did East India Company crumple the administrative and political structures of India? We all know that how the Indian economy was ruined by the British aggrandization, more importantly, the greedy policies implemented by the Britishers that will safeguard their own interest and ruin the Indian interest. But how far, to a larger extent, how did they totally crumple the political structure? We all know that in the provinces they had 11 provinces in total at the time of independence, but despite the fact being centralized, how did that ruin the Indian political system and the administrative structures? We are going to discuss that all that in detail. So like always, we're going to flash rewind a little bit so that we can understand some part of the history as well. So East India Company got the first right, that is the first Diwani rights after the Battle of Buxar from 1765 onwards. And Diwani rights means right to collect taxes from places of Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa. So these were the places where they got the rights to collect taxes without taking any responsibility. Yes, the kings and the rulers were already existing and they were there and they were allowed to exist, but the problem is that they don't have the revenue or the money to have the revenue services, more importantly the expenditure processes for these common citizens and these people. Like for example, here in Indian government they have direct taxes and indirect taxes. So direct taxes, that's what we are talking about over here, that is income taxes. From the salaries, from the income, the government will be collecting few amounts of rupee so that they can use it for the expenditure, more importantly for the revenue purposes for the nation. But right after the Battle of Buxar, these Diwans and more importantly these rulers had only the responsibility to look after or take care the needs of these citizens. But they didn't have the money or the revenue to look after their needs. All the rights or all the revenue taxation systems were taken over by the East India Company, and they wouldn't contribute much of the help to these citizens as well. So that was the first step of imbalance to the political structure, or I would say the administrative systems of India. And later on, these greedy aggrandization policies of expansionism, more importantly, the doctrine of labs or the effective control and the subsidiary alliances, all these put forward more ways and more methods for these East India Company or the Britishers to expand their territory without taking up the responsibility. So all these purposes were in order to cater the needs of the Britishers so that they can get the revenue, money, more importantly market for their products and create raw materials for their products. But they are not giving much back to the economy or giving much back to the system, to taking care of them, to doing all these activities related to agriculture as well. For example, there was a system called permanent settlement or collecting taxes from the peasants. It was a high morbid rate of taxation system from these agriculture producers, but without giving much or contribution to these agriculture, more importantly any facilities for irrigations, subsidies for agriculture, giving good yield or seeds for these peasants as well. So no contributions were given howsoever for these peasants, but the Britishers were expected to collect taxes from them. So we all know that even now during these period, being supported and backed by the government, there are lots of uncertain calamities faced by these peasants, like drought, flood, more importantly crop failure, and all these pesticides related issues would also affect the yield of agriculture produce. But despite all these facts and figures, these peasants are supposed to pay back the money tenfold to these East India companies. So how is that going to contribute to the economical system? More importantly, that's going to shatter all forms of political structure. We have a government so that what? They will look after us, and from the money collected from us, they'll be looking after the systems of expenditure and expenses. But they are just collecting the money for their own purposes, and nothing much is being contributed back to the system. And it was essentially this political and administrative mishap which led to these formations of 1857 Sepoy Mutiny and other forms of rebellions as well. And then right after Sepoy Mutiny from 1858 onwards, the crown totally assumed the power of India and proclaimed herself to be the Queen of India, and even said that now was the time for good governance in India. But even then we all know that for how far it was a good governance, it was totally for their own purposes, totally for their own wishes, and neglected the needs of Indian expenditures as well, totally. And when you talk about administration, the highermost post is taken over by the IAS or the IPS and the bureaucratic services. But all these were in disadvantage of the Indians. That is, the age was reduced from here and there and time again. And more importantly, you have to get sponsorship so that you will need to be selected for the examinations as well. So, in short and total, Indians were totally put in the disadvantaged sections so that they wouldn't get the higher ranks of the administration services. And when foreigners are looking after the political and administration structures of in a different nation, we know how far sincere or genuine they can be, because it's not their homeland. They're not going to settle over here. They're going to take all the monies and all these purposes from here and take it back to their home nations. So the objectives is quite clear up ahead, and they're here just for that their work will run smoothly. And not to forget that right after the Sepoy Mutiny, yes, the crown did take over the power of India from the East India Company, but don't forget that it was an absentee sovereignty. For example, here in India, we have a president present over here. We have our prime minister present in our own territory. We have the chief ministers, governors present in their own even states. But we don't have these queen during those East India Company, and then later on the British rule during those period. We didn't have the queen over here in the Indian territory. So it's practically impossible for someone to rule over from thousands of kilometers away from her own mainland and then calling it her own territory or proclaiming herself to be the queen. And the one more cornerstone for the administration and political structure is the legislative and the judiciary. So it was totally in favor of the Britishers. Yes, I'm repeating the sentences again and again. The legislative, all the rules and regulations, purposes here in India were laid down to cater the needs of only the East India Company and not for the Britishers. Because we all know it's pretty much evident that nationalist leaders started speaking up for these legislative impracticalities of not including Indians or not including much of Indian people in the legislative council. And yes, for the judiciary, all the systems and laws and rules and regulations were made in different sectors. That is, one person or one category will have different laws governing him, and the other person will have a different law governing him or her. And more importantly, we didn't have the uniform civil code, all the rules and regulations which will govern everyone irrespective of what they are or what caste, creed, religion, or place of worship or place of birth. It doesn't matter what you are, you will be having a uniform civil code prevalent towards the territory in all throughout. But during those period, one person of Kshatriyas will be having different rules and regulations, one person of Shudras, and one person of Brahmin will be having different set of rules and regulations to govern him. And this, yes, again, crumple the administrative and more importantly the political structures of India. So it wasn't just a drain of wealth or exploiting the India economically for their own benefit. It was more importantly like destroying or shattering the footholds or the legs of all forms of our political structures and administrative systems here in India. And it's been like 75 years and plus of attaining independence, and this is the reason why we are not able to have the political structure, more importantly the stability and uniformity of all forms of politicality and administration here in India, because the damage left by the Britishers were so much and so severe that it will take some more years to overcome all that. And that's it for today's video. I really hope that you all liked it. Please comment, share, and subscribe for more videos. Thank you so much for everyone watching, and bye bye.